Well, that's the thing. We specifically tried not to say what it is because it might stop it becoming what it might be. So what it is dialogue, right? Stimulating dialogue and working on something without knowing exactly what it is. And then what we'll do is make a report and use that to stimulate the next thing.
Do you remember anything that we discussed from last time that was particularly memorable?
I think this where we are is quite an interesting place to be. In our this area of the conversation. I think that's like.
I guess we're just starting again, aren't we? I mean, we
But
can't pick up where we left off in the
No,
conversation.
we grow like constantly. We're like organisms. Like we realize that as well. Like the summer and like this distilling of our book now has been longer. So now we realize when we speak to each other and we're preparing for a big lecture that's coming up, we have a different kind of knowledge. Quite useful. A little bit more soft in our approach. Like it's more embedded. That might sound wafty, but whereas when we made our book, we were a bit like languaged out. I think everything became complex.
Yeah, maybe you could say the dust has settled.
The dust is settled, yeah.
But so maybe when we we only spoke, maybe it was like 2 months ago, let's say, or 3. I mean, what would have been the dust, I guess?
Yeah, it's almost like particles of the process, right? It's like, I was just thinking you're so used to these expressions, but I think what it means is that, when you're sort of around the particles of a process, like almost like your brain is full of unresolved material. Memory hasn't yet helped distill anything. So I feel like now the settling is more that it's become, you need to speak to a neuroscientist to understand what's happening there, but it's essentially entered into different zones of the mind, what we've learned, which I feel particularly clear about what it is we're doing, where our agenda is, and excited to use it, in the world.
Is this like in relation to, let's say, your book that maps your practice?
I think that's what you're saying, because in the process of making the book, we obviously went on like a year, 2 year, because it was also part of the exhibition in China. So a 2-year development of the language, or refining the language around what it is that we do. And in the process of that, we kind of coined certain terms or formalized certain ways of working, which I guess at that last time were way more present in the fact that they'd kind of just landed. Right now they've settled, and
yeah, they make sense. Make sense in a deeper way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Ollie said, it's 2 year or more, and also remember it's before that, 15 years of practice. So a lot was brought up through that process.
Because the book to me feels like there is an element of psychogeography in the book. Like when I look at it, it looks like mapping of something that even as it's presented is not fully articulated.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Totally. Yeah, our process, I think, is a sort of publishing as research method, meaning that the making of the book itself is an opportunity to study and therefore distill methods so we can, in a sense, revisit what we do in a more easy way. So it is a sort of geography of our practice. And, as a published material, it's a geography of the practice too, because it's not, it has to be explored. It's like a terrain. There's an element of distilling into this lexicon which feels clear, but it needs, I would say, in another 10 years, another pass. It's definitely a raw material.
But it's not. I don't think we were trying to make it all 100% clear, because it's not like a how-to. It's really trying to kind of like, throw the ideas out there in a way, and it's not. I don't think you can refine it down to like it makes so much sense. There's definitely some ambiguity still left in there, a healthy dose.
But I think in a way that's where we want things to always exist, because there's this term that I really love, which is just having a porous participation with the world. It's much more endearing to think of the world in that way, and a book as a world. I think we hope that audiences are going to have some kind of relationship with that, rather than be able to like a dichotomous, clear relationship, like a linear relationship. in the same way we had that relationship with the material.
But what about rigor? Because it does feel rigorous in a way. And what's your relationship with rigor?
That's a good question. Well, we talked about this yesterday, didn't we? It's about this sort of applied craft. You know, like the applied craft of bookmaking and typography is fundamental to carrying out the tasks of the research. So we don't act or relate to applied crafts in some sort of artistic way. We apply in a sort of scientific way to try and understand how the craft functions and how to make it work. And in a way of service to the ideas.
I mean, I was just walking from Bethnal Green Station, and I was thinking, I was actually trying to remember what we discussed last time in our lost conversation. And I guess we were sort of getting to know each other. And this idea of, I was actually thinking how attractive the city is, or this threat from Bethnal Green Station to here. And then I was just thinking about this idea of attraction, and I was like, oh, I'm attracted to that, I'm attracted to that. There were a few moments in the city, and I was like, oh, then actually there was an element of attraction that we explored, which was like attraction of you to each other, like what actually kind of how this whole thing started. Do you ever think about it in terms of attraction, or how would you define attraction in the context of the work, maybe in the context in which the practice has kind of started?
It's a nice word, that.
Yeah.
It's also one of those words that you can play with because it obviously has like connotations of like romantic engagement, but actually, of course it's important because especially in such a world where so much exists, and I think what we would maybe use as an alternative word is attention, you know, like paying attention, or in a sense like attracting attention. And like the idea of reowning the word attention, at least for me, it's very important because it relates to the idea of practice, because a practice in a sense is literally about remaining and remembering what it is you're doing, in a sense like paying attention. Because otherwise there's so much that can derail you. There's like, we're living in a world with like thousands of options like consistently. So like good luck if you try to just be porous and participate with the world without a discipline of attention.
What do you think of it?
I would say, I mean, I agree with what Rory's saying, but in more directly related to attraction, like we're not very good at doing things that we do not believe in, right? So how do we know what to work on? It's really through like what attracts us or what stimulates us or what we see a potential in. So I'd say there is, and a lot of it's not necessarily fully calculated. We can just sense whether something is compatible with our way of thinking, and that is it's kind of a way of, you know, reducing down the let's say that basically reducing down the potential of the things we might take on, or the way we might approach things. We were able to kind of narrow that down.
Is there something in this part of London that is attractive, or that is also resonant with you and your practice in the way that?
Yeah, I really think so. It's such a mishmash. It's like urbanism in general is really attractive to us. Like we made our first project in Prague about a sense of place of a city.
Or the very first project.
Yeah.
This was
when we were second year of university. And we love projecting meaning onto things like environments, like finding metaphor, like bridges between environments. So we used to, you know, like in that case, each doorway represented a sort of like frame of almost like a tension in which you could like study what was on it and what marks were there. And it's sort of quite elemental. I think we've always been attracted to the way in which a city, this kind of tensions exist so often, like this tension between bureaucracy and freedom, or like, you know, like standardization and like eclecticity, you know, this sort of accumulation. You know, a lot of the vocabulary you could use geographically to understand a city is very associated with what we use. It's almost a direct equivalent.
That Prague project, then, is that in any way like foundational? Is there something in it that is very clear?
Well, I mean, I don't know if at the time, maybe it was just indicative of like our instincts towards things at the time, but I think definitely like the doorway as a symbol has become really, I mean, it actually ends up on our book, doesn't it? The front cover of the book is a door. We'd not made that connection, but now that you bring it up, it's like a lot of our projects talk about like thresholds and how you pass from one threshold into another. So maybe like without knowing it, we were plotting a pathway.
That's funny.
Wow, that is really interesting. I mean, door is a direct, I mean, it is a book, isn't it? Like it is a cover.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the frontispiece is like often in old books was like the architectural equivalent, right? It was drawn and engraved entrance, facade with all the embellishments and messages. So buildings are like books and books are like buildings.
And now you say how important it is and how you see design as a design of practice. And actually practice is an act of design. Again, is this something that was always embedded and embodied in OKRM? Or is this something that you became aware of at some point and realized this is what we're doing and this is something that we can now articulate as a method?
It's a good question, like also in terms of when do things become clear? Like at what point, you know, this kind of constant relationship between like intuition, conscious and intuitive. It's like, you know, so often you're working with things, you have no idea what the words are for it. But once you discover the language, it becomes conscious. You have more control over it or more ability to work with it.
I do feel like there was, I think when we first started the studio, I wouldn't say that we were even really conscious of exactly what it meant to have a practice. I know that word was used a lot around that time, and to me, it always seemed a bit abstract until I would say actually a bit later when you actually realize that, I think we realized about 5 years ago that most of the things we're doing are actually research-based, whereas we'd never called ourselves a research studio before that. But in the way that we work, we're constantly testing out things, and like, you know, there's an aspect to that which is research in a raw form. But it took us a while to realize exactly what it was we were doing. I don't think we would have put a label on that before.
No.
So there is an awareness that's developed in relation to that.
Yeah, and we
more
pay
recently
attention.
rather than like
we pay
from
a
the
lot
beginning.
of attention to that now.
There's also something about this word practice that had started to really permeated culture, and it really became something that everyone's kind of tried to define themselves in relation to. I was really refreshed by Eddie Heathcote, the architecture editor of architecture critic of Financial Times. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. And I think in conversation, I said something, you're writing practice. And he said, no, it's not a practice. I just write. It's my job. And I thought that was really refreshing. And we went on to kind of discuss that a little bit. Yeah.
There is a point where the overuse of a word basically renders it a bit meaningless.
Well, you destroy it by making it explicit.
So how do we make sure that practice doesn't get destroyed as a word? Do we like the word?
To make implicit things explicit is to destroy them, isn't it? So if you really love something, it should remain implicit in whatever you're doing rather than explicit. But it's too difficult because we have to share ideas with people. And at this point in time, we use the word project so much that at some point I kept hearing you say project, and I'd always be like almost like swatting flies. And at the same time, practice may now be a little bit like a better word because it tends to be said once and then you move on. Plus, we started to think of project in its real term, which means to like project something out there, throw, right? So if you start thinking of a project tile, you tend not to want to use it so much as like the sort of overall, because you don't want to, I don't know. To be honest, I think these are games, they're games of language. Like the word design is also like something that you can really play with and get to re-own and reconsider and like play with, which we're currently doing a lot of as well. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to worry about it too much because it's stifling. Fear in general is not really useful. So we tend to like notice a problem. Again, noticing the word problem is like to create a question. Once that question is stimulating enough, it will make you want to answer it, right? It will make you want to work with it. So if we create a question around practice and whether practice is going to be used enough, we'll take that really seriously. It will become part of our life for the next while, So we have to be careful somehow with what we, again, pay attention to.
But do we also need to be careful with how much we expand these definitions? Because I guess you are graphic designers.
Yeah.
You are publishers.
Yeah.
You're not lawyers. I was going to say you're not architects.
Sometimes
maybe you wouldn't dispute that.
Sometimes we have to make contracts and sign them off and make sure we're not going to get screwed over. There's a lot of work that goes on inside of design.
What did we were trying to define, we said something about what design was the other day, which is, I'm not going to be able to reel it off now. But back to your point, yes, we are graphic designers, we are publishers. We're not architects, but we do design things spatially, and either that's through metaphor within, a book project, but it can also be actually spatially. So design is a much broader term than.
I think when we realised we went back to our art school roots and we were talking about our roots in general, we talked about really what we were doing at college was philosophy. We spent the majority of our time trying to figure out meaning in life, like mostly. We didn't apply that much actual through graphic design, which is literally the arrangement of images and text, right? We didn't have much images and text. So you have to generate the content first, right? And at that point, you're trying to set yourselves up for a graphic design project, but the project's more like, what is the world? What does it mean? What are we interested in?
Well, this is one thing I really learned in the publishing forum that I organized. There was a group of people there in the audience that were students or recent graduates of, let's say, publishing courses or graphic design courses. And what really emerged is that they were taught to design, but they were not taught to produce content. And so they found themselves in these vicious circles of kind of being almost like forced to produce content as well as design that content. But it's not a natural place to be for a designer, or is it?
Well, I personally think that when you're studying, you're not a designer yet. You're just a person that thinks they're creative or is trying to be creative. You're not stuck in the ways of a graphic designer, are you? You're still thinking about things and trying to make things. So I would say that at college it's probably more hard just to be a graphic designer. I think your instinct is more to make things or make ideas. The application or the craft is something which I think is a skill that's learned, but I think everyone has this.
But we certainly noticed
to
content
make
as a oblivion, like as in it didn't exist, and we would be like, okay, great, we're DJs, let's make a club night, let's make a party. We then need a poster. Fantastic, we're graphic designers, we can do that. We've got a title, we've got names, we've got dates, we've got stuff, we've got content. So it's like suddenly you get this correlation. Like, I remember it really well, and it still happens. Is what we do now. It's like you stimulate something, a kind of world to happen, like a happening to happen, and then you conceal it and send it through graphic design. And when I think of it, and we play with this idea still, like with projects like, Goldwin Zero, for example, which like 3 years, like full deep dive into sort of design research and all forms of mediums, spatial, film, etc., being produced. in the end, it becomes a kind of, after 3 years, a book project called a nature, the very nature of materiality. Is everything of service to that moment of graphic design? That moment of being able to create a kind of, meaningful order around this research and idea. It certainly feels like a gift as graphic designers to have all this content that we've generated over that period to work with. So in a way, it's mutually beneficial to both the graphic designer of our practice and the researcher, content making side of our practice, the book making side, the publishing.
But this question of content again, you still, like, let's say you receive a piece of very crappy text. I mean, what do you do?
Well, it depends what for.
For a magazine or a book or a...
If it's an essay, we don't start editing the essay. But if it's sometimes we might say, we need to reconsider who's writing or whatever, but quite rarely, But I would say we might push the editors in the direction of some people, but we've in terms of the content that we really edit, it's anything which is like display content or it's like the structure of the content. It's more about how
you're talking about more like conventional commissioned book projects, right?
Yeah.
But in other cases, we might generate all aspects of the content as the editors of the book.
Yeah, but the question was about text that's supplied.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it doesn't work like that. Like, this is the thing. It's people ask us this. They're like, what, when you receive a brief or when you receive text or it's so rare that we get this entrance into a project. Like, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Like a folder of text, a folder of images, like a nice brief. Someone's really thought about it, and we're just graphic designers. It would be really cool. In a way, it's refreshing. We worked ourselves away from that so much in the early years that I don't think we really get. Those people aren't attracted to us anymore. So we tend to start book projects which are in the case of, say, John Acumfra, who we've been working with now for at least a year or around a year. It's like his, decades of work, an incredibly rich practice, an amazing editor, Eko Eshwan, who's already done like a whole curatorial work around the sort of themes that accompany this kind of archival life. And then our work is to sort of make a sort of space. It's like literally like architecture around that content and in relation to it, and give order to it.
It's interesting actually, because that book does have a just talking about architecture. This is designed around a spatial metaphor. So although Ekau is editing all the content for the book, we then put down a kind of metaphor for the book as a object, which will then brief him back on on what copy needs to go around the kind of his curatorial part of it. So like, how many introductions does there want to each section, and that it kind of works in a way which is not usual, So there is something he's having to respond to make the content fit the concept.
But architectural metaphors, like in this case, it's a kind of pavilion in the countryside with like 3 individual spaces connected by a central chamber with these like long thresholded like corridors to connect to them. It's really imagined in such a way and discussed, and we write in a way a script for this space that it gives everybody a chance to work collectively, a collective imagination, which is really useful. So it's a scenario, it's like a way of working together.
I guess at the core of this question about, let's say, receiving a piece of something that may not feel right, or I guess is the question that about the edges of what you do, and I guess as you're describing it, is that those edges are so they don't exist almost. Or that they do exist, but that they're so kind of porous. And
porous participation is the best term I know right now to describe the state we're in. Like we participate in a very open way with the world. And because we're talking about the world, I don't mean like the world, the globe. I mean also the worlds we create or others create for us or with us. And then you have a porous participation with those worlds. And in those worlds, you basically sign up for an amount of time to spend in them and develop something. I don't think it's that different to like, you know, having a friend when you're a kid and it's a world, right? Like all summer, it's like you've got a mate, maybe you've got a couple of mates, maybe you've got a couple of trees and a garden or whatever. You know, it's the same, right? You have a porous participation with that world, and over the summer you might develop games and spaces of privacy and participation, all sorts of politics, and humans do that. So what we're talking about isn't some sort of like artifice, it's like a very human condition that we seek out, you know? And it's weird how that's like rarefied. It shouldn't be. It should be just like, we should be just like that's just life, right? That's normal. But the problem is that there's so many things in our way.
Another good example, I think we're working on a project at the moment, which is for the TTIA, Tiger Takahashi Institute of Archaeology, which is a newspaper, which is a kind of monthly newspaper. And, you know, they're like, we want to do 12 a year, and it's going to be for 3 years. And then and there's always this idea about like working with like this idea of time or history. And so, you know, they've given us, you know, what is the title of this thing? And we're like, we should stage it based rather than on like Western idea of time, on the Japanese idea of time. So then once you start researching into that history, even like the frequency is based on a concept. You know, it's not just taken for granted that it's, you know, January, February, March, April. There's all these different metaphors of nature embedded within the kind of Japanese tradition of time, which then starts to stimulate a little bit more of a language around how you talk about a periodical. Yeah. So,
and that's happening within a project that we designed, which is the TTIA, that we designed in order to operate as a communication and research outpost for Tiger post his death, you know, as a way of continuing the kind of philosophy and practice. And just stimulating a kind of existence of that kind of content, you know, because that newspaper is a content within the TTIA. Yeah, it's a content within itself, and then we design. It's like, so you get quite, as you can imagine, like a garden. It's like you have the structural framework, and then you have the organisms, and each one has a whole. So you can go as deep as you want, honestly, into worlds. They hold a lot of space.
Yeah. No, I think it's remarkable. I think it really is remarkable. Like I'm trying to kind of create a flow of a conversation, but at the same time I'm reflecting on just the very I mean it's not really a method because it varies from project to project. It's I guess it's your approach. Maybe approach is a good word.
It's our approach, but I'm saying I don't feel like we should be in credit. It's not ours. It's literally human. I think it is. The more you read and the more you uncover, the more you realize this is like not that rare originally.
But let's talk about it. I mean, let's talk about it from a business point of view.
Yeah, good idea.
Let's like kind of remove ourselves from the conceptual. Because I guess maybe if we test it against the business, it working as a business model or it working in kind of economic reality of the world, perhaps we can actually understand more clearly what that actually then, how it actually manifests. So now I'm trying to kind of think what would be a way to test it economically.
When you say it,
your approach or your.
Well, look, what are you going to do? You're going to wait in line for somebody else to kind of consider what the meaning of the world is, or are you going to suggest it? You know, it's just a question of authorship at some point.
Yeah,
right?
but I guess, so if I was to think, well, who sells meaning? A guru sells meaning, or church sells meaning, or a politician sells meaning. Do you feel any affinity with these professions? Guru, priest, politician?
Only as far as their human kind of conditions. I mean, I don't think we ever talk about that intersection, do we?
No, but we do. But we, like, in the same way as a priest might remind people of a certain spiritual, philosophical framework to live your life by, we might remind whoever it is we're working with that there is a common idea through which decisions should be made. So, you know, we are establishing in that same way, some kind of a pathway, you know, and rules or tools to act with.
Yeah, like a kind of, dare I say it, and hopefully a prophetic method, a kind of finding through lines and harmonies within meaning. And also you could call it religio, which is like a sort of framework of interconnections. You know, logos, like literally. I mean, it's just all games, you know, they're like games of the same thing. They're like all great ways. We do sell that, I guess, but we don't always know we're selling that, you know. But it is entrepreneurial, and we're not scared of the entrepreneurial side of this. This is why we're not fine artists, like waiting to be sold, artifacts to be sold that come out of our practice, you know, because in the end we love being entrepreneurial. Like, it's stimulating.
Yeah, if you talk about back to the business model, like, we do invest or dedicate a huge amount of time in something which maybe a lot of design studios might skip, which is like really trying to define a philosophy or approach for each project. Of course, there's similarities between all of them, but what that does is that it creates a kind of it demands a long-term relationship, because it takes a long time to establish and to fulfill these ideas. So it's not about quick hits. It's about defining something which has the potential to grow and develop over time.
But that sounds like a very let's use the word privileged. I can't think of a better word, but that's a privileged position to be able to kind of invest and dedicate resources and time to a process of search, meandering, kind of looking at a reflection and kind of wondering, what do I see here? Is this something that was always there, or is this something that you had to actively build? A space that will allow you this.
I would say that we always
luxury
have in different ways. When we were younger, of course, we've always gone beyond. Like, you know, it wasn't unusual for us in the early days to literally transform a small project into something bigger by saying, hey, we could actually do this. So.
And can I ask, is that even when you're not paid for it?
Yeah.
In those early days,
because it wasn't.
It not a service.
At that point, it wasn't about making a profit. It was about like building out, you know, creating opportunities for us to work into. That was the most.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it like a privilege or what was the other word you used?
Luxury.
Luxury, yeah. Well, luxury means excess, right? And privilege is like, I don't know what it means, but I don't know if it relates. It's more like affordance. I think it's like what you afford in the way that you work, right? Because you could spend like all your time affording like numerous studies into like formal games of geometry or whatever. It's very time consuming. You could also afford time to like individually kern in letters and track them so there's no rivers in your typography, you know. Or you could industrialize those things and try to like not be seduced by form and consider dedicating time to something else. I think it's that. I think it's we don't like wasting time, and we do not like to be bourgeois. Like, it's really off-putting. Like it's off-putting when we start realizing we might be like making excessive, unnecessary additions to anything. Like it has to feel like really necessary.
But there is also effort that goes into the minimalist approach. I mean,
well, it gets simple. I don't think it gets minimalist. It just gets simple. Because if you start to have a strong ideology of like not interested in like wasting, not interested in like confusing, not interested in like you know, and also interested in being clear and interested in making sure that this is paying attention, someone else can pay attention to it, that it can be attractive in that way. The form looks after itself. It becomes simple, you know.
Well, okay, so it becomes simple, but it doesn't mean that it takes less time.
No, it takes so much time to make something simple. I mean, it's
exactly.
like we're not the first to say that. It's like classic.
So back to this point about in early days taking a project and just taking it as far as you can. As you say, you're not ornating it as much as you can, but you're taking it as far as you can.
Yeah.
Did you see that as an investment, or did you not even ever think in economic terms about that time that is beyond what, let's say, you're paid?
I would say that we were at that age. We were hungry for opportunity, not for money, and obviously we needed to get by. It wasn't like we had money coming from anywhere else, but it was more. I would say there was a lack of privilege when it came to like great opportunities. So you would take something small and you'd make it a great opportunity through your entrepreneurialism somehow.
And curiosity.
Yeah.
But it's also like at some point, others realize that we are those people. And they can't have necessarily realized by like, you know, like us, say, giving a lecture or giving some kind of incredibly articulate description of what's on offer, because we wouldn't have really known it. But I think they can sense that, you know. So like when we started working with Strelka, which is, you know, architectural media institution in Moscow, 2012. That was the first time we started to be able to like have enough space to work in, and also work with people that were genuinely, you know, utopian, to want to invest in manifesto making and, you know, let's say ongoing dialogue and research into like meaning of something. In this case, an institution, but that ultimately spell out or suggested a future possibility of a new Russia, which obviously was not successful at, but in any case, it certainly suggested some good things. That was cool. We learned a lot, because once you can practice it, you can get used to it and you know what you do. So like after Strelka, when it came to things like, let's say, probably skipping many years, but like Elix, which is a fashion project run by, you know, Matthew Williams, who again was a utopian person interested in the world and possibility. We were able to start to say, okay, let's be entrepreneurial. Let's like create full scope. We're not going to just make a logo. You can invest into like the philosophy of this project. You can invest into all the various potentials of design, and they can all be interconnected. That's where it starts being the beginning of the sort of what we call the kind of total artwork or total framework approach. From there, you get used to these things, you know, and then you kind of struggle to look back. Also, alongside that, starting things like InOtherWords, which is a bit more like, it's just a similar kind of method, you know, it's like building a kind of world. We don't use this world it's a new term, right, for us, because it's not like we go around, we're like building worlds when you're like a young designer. It's stupid. It's like talking about your practice when you're straight out of college. It's like, what practice? Like, but we do, the world thing is really useful because you can be in it, and you can need it and exist within it, and we are instrumental to it, right? Which means you can generate ongoing and consistent work through these worlds. which I guess is entrepreneurial, but we try to leave that at the door once it's gone through its conception. We try not to be capitalistically contrived by the work, because otherwise it's tricky, because you can over capitalize on it and over in a sense like get lost by like functions of capitalism, which are like linearity, like consistency, industrial processes, time,
division of labor,
all these things which are ultimately kind of right bad for meaning,
creativity.
Yeah, bad for creativity. So you know, it's that thresholds basically. You go through them, and yeah, that's what I mean by leaving them at the door. The door comes up again, but you know, like just don't bring these things into your practice. That's probably where the practice or studio is a word we use to also just talk about a kind of clear space of like working without thinking. We don't. The contracts and the project forms and the stages of work and the budgets are not practice. Neither are they even studio. I think of those things as like in a threshold before the studio and before the practice. Whereas I think a lot of people, like design studios, probably have a lot more presence of those things in their actual space. Timesheets, you know, I find timesheets fundamentally negative for like right hemisphere culture, you know, like, and I used to have to do that when I was working in New York. It was like end of every day, write down what I've done. I'm like, it's like very, very difficult. You don't feel like it, you know? So I don't know what's driving that awareness, but I suppose it's an instinct, which is just to preserve creativity, you know? We believe in it.
And then I guess a real key component in your practice is the collaborator, client. I don't know how you actually refer to them, to these people that either bring content or, as you said, sometimes actually they maybe just bring money and the beginning of an idea.
Or
and
context.
Context.
Or concept.
And they vary. They vary in what they do. You know, architects, fashion designers, artists. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they're actually all the same, or there are some nuances nuanced differences between, let's say, other fields, because field is a defined space in some way that you have noticed.
No, it's good to refer to them.
And that kind of, in some way, maybe informs some part of your approach to when they approach you.
I think one thing that's consistent is that we always work with individuals. It's rare that we work with companies. You know, when you're working with, like, your point of contact is not the individual that is making the decisions or the curious, creative, dynamic person, right? We're not very good when, you know, in fact, I just don't think we're not attracted to those scenarios where we don't have the dialogue with the person, the right person, essentially. Would you say that's...
Yeah, no, that is true generally. I think there's definite exceptions, and it's not a rule like going forward, or even, you know, it's not something we try not to be prejudiced. So we try to just open things up. If there's a potential to open something up, then that person tends to be someone we want to work with. But it's really obvious where that person you're talking to is maybe not able to, or just doesn't really maybe know what you're talking about. And they tend to be people which aren't necessarily in charge, right? Like, don't necessarily have the agency to engage. But there are all sorts of others. This sense of fields, I'm growing more and more skeptical of that. I think that, like, the reason why we're so interested in this word design as a sort of umbrella is because I really do believe it's a good way of unifying, like, and this kind of sense of a kind of common unity, you know, like a community of within something. It's more healthy to consider. I'm not saying there's not like nuanced differences, but and fundamentally differences of understanding technologies like applied crafts and legal matters and all sorts of things, right? But you can find, you know, one of my best friends is works with trees, and a lot of our conversations about creativity like seem to work quite well with him talking about trees and me talking about say design or books. You know, you can do that.
Sure.
You can,
of course, and it's productive. Probably.
It's productive. Yeah.
But without a doubt, an architect is different than a fashion designer.
Architects
than an
are
artist.
actually one of those people that are quite different.
Okay, go, Rory. Trash.
Not always, not always, but I think architects are like potentially overly.
Architects
they're overly specialized.
Yeah,
right?
they go through 5 years of education.
Yeah.
And to build a building takes 5-6 years.
Right, and the thing is,
that's one.
Architecture is therefore like a sort of science, right, of sorts. It's almost like it's professional, accredited science. It's definite. And it needs to be based on bureaucracy. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of designers in architecture or artists or whoever you want to call, poets, whatever you want to call them, in architecture. And when we find one, like Freck, for example, from Europe, who's a great collaborator, he's an artist in an architecture sort of realm, so to speak, meaning he likes questions and he wants to live with questions a lot. Whereas some architects, they probably just spend too much time in architecture, so they become overly specialized, which means you're talking about something, and you want to talk about the world or the metaphor of it, and then some architects might struggle to go beyond
the building.
But
then, I think when we the majority of the architects or architectural projects we've worked with are more with architects that have kind of like turned to academia or to curatorial, editorial practices, and it's more about the ideas around architecture than it is about like showing a building or working with a building. We haven't done that much of that, have we? I mean, we have done identities for architecture practices, but
like Federico Campagna's lecture at the AA on metaphysical architecture really is a good one, in that reminding you really what is architecture. Like, the sense of, even he goes into the definition of architectonica and the sort of, in a sense, the origins of architecture and metaphysics, and it's really cool. Like, it reminds you that it's architecture is such a great field for going there, like it's for opening up what is the world, what does it mean, how do we live. These areas are super
there
great,
is this preconception that architecture, because it's like it's a profession. I mean, it's literally a kind of a professional field. It's regulated. There is a British Institute, Royal Institute of British Architects. So I take that point, that I have always been very keen on expanding this discussion within the field of architecture towards like artists, designers, and so on. But then it's funny that I don't really see, let's say, an art school inviting an architect to give a lecture. I don't see a printmaking course inviting an architect to give a lecture, or inviting a scientist to give a lecture. Whereas at the AA, you will find, a printmaker giving a lecture, or you will find a designer giving a lecture. So it might be the AA that is a kind of very progressive
I would say
place.
so. Probably people like yourself that are just interested in also not dying in architecture, want to like make sure that architecture becomes something more. But it's also, I with this, I just told you about Open Studio, but we specifically realized we've invited 6 others or 7 others, 3 are architects. I forgot in a way, but they're, Samir from OMA is sort of a researcher. He's certainly, the conversations we've had with him before are like very open. I'm curious about Paul. I haven't met him, Paul Cornett, but he works with Alessia Ascari on Capsule, and clearly has entered into the world of sort of brand activation and product spaces and how those function in relation to like communications. FRAC is obviously, we've spoken about, but I think it's cool to get architects out of like architectural realms and talk about other things for sure. I mean, I don't know if I reckon there must be consistent examples of that, I hope.
Well, this summer I organized 2 programs at the AA. One was Publishing Architecture Forum, and then the other one was Film Architecture Forum that followed. And obviously I saw them as they were separate, they were marketed separately, but actually it's kind of when the Film Architecture Forum started, I realized actually how similar they are. What they're talking about is they're talking about space that's created within which some ideas are communicated or mediated. They're both concerned with media or mediation of architecture or spatial ideas, let's say. I mean, I was very keen on, in both cases, not just having people there that are just using this word architecture. And so maybe we could kind of slightly reflect back to your practice and this question of mediation and modes of mediation. So you use film, you use kind of printed matter, you use different mediums. How do you think about those? I mean, it's a very broad and open question.
No, it's yesterday we had a similar question in an interview we were giving. It's one of those ones where we used to get stifled by this because people are obsessed by like segregation. Mm-hmm. The Western system is obsessed by specificity and segregation. And it always bothered us because we didn't really see that much difference. Like space is space, right? Content is content. Content needs space. It needs places to go. Obviously, each one of those contexts requires a different applied craft to realize it. In certain areas like bookmaking, there's a predominantly more production to be done here internally, but with making a film, there's so many facilities of like editors and amazing cinematographers and others, lighting, etc., that can help you construct that work. In exhibitions too, like in architecture, it's so much more supported. Like you don't have to really design that much physically, right? You can kind of suggest it and it comes to life, which is pretty cool. It's like, so, and I would say in general with technologies, like becoming more and more like able to predict what you need from your applied crafts, you can save a lot of time, which means it places more emphasis on what is the content that you're placing, what does it mean, that you can travel through these mediums pretty easly, like day to day.
I guess what's interesting is that you can travel between them, but you still have, I guess your approach to them still is fundamentally rooted in your way of thinking as, so I don't know, like graphic designers.
So design to us is more about the choreography of many things from different places, whether that be like ideas, symbols, or artifacts, or whatever it is you're dealing with. And so if you consider design on that level, then to apply it into the different pots of like a book, a film, a space, they're just the ways of delivering it, aren't they? Actually, the majority of the design thinking is about the specific narrative that's being constructed out of these different elements.
And then there's an element of just understanding how to, like, we're conscious of space, like physical, real space, as well as metaphorical space, but we exist in that. We discuss distance and tensions and orders and sequences and scales a lot. But those same languages exist within the book too, like form of a book. You said it yourself. They are equivalents, like total equivalents. I think probably back in the day,
because we started off with book design being something which was a much bigger part of our, proportionally a much bigger part of our practice back in the day. we are trained in the way of thinking about how you structure something, whether it be like, you know, have some, whatever the rhythm is, which is, you know, in a book design, it's mechanical. So there is actual structure, which is imposed. But so when we come back to editing a film, for example, we might be thinking in the manner of editing a book.
Well, they're not different.
They're not so different.
I mean, there's a level,
but there is an inherent, there is like an inherent feel that comes from your kind of original.
Yeah, that might be a
medium.
distinguishing factor in a way.
Yeah, but I think our films are like comparable to our book works in that they have strong structural frameworks. I would say that the most complex work that we haven't talked about is the relationship between presentation and representation. You know, like the world that we exist in doesn't exist only in like presentational reality, right? It's all in representational realities. I don't mean just like the representation of an artwork in a book. Of course, that is tier 1 representation, right? But it's or maybe even tier 2. I don't know if you get into like other forms of psychology or so on about representation in relation to like memory but we're dealing with like a world of images now, you know, a world of representing the work you've made, and also the representational links and realities, links between things within a given reality, which is like brand and like, well, the worlds we discussed, you know, which have to like, in a sense, be transmitted, or we call like broadcast into people's lives via like, you know, all sorts of ways we rather didn't exist but do. You know, like most people consume our books via images, whether we like it or not. Now, rather than just be like, you know, it doesn't matter, like we consider the image of the book. Same way when we were working with CCA, with Francesco Guruti, like it was so fascinating to realize that CCA ultimately make exhibitions as representational sets. You know, and how you could, when we made the exhibition Our Happy Life, it was all about making a set for photography that would then be transmitted via like the
Obviously,
internet.
their first port of contact is with visitors, but being where it is, there's a huge global audience that doesn't go to the exhibitions, right?
Yeah.
So,
and we love the relationship between like spaces and books, and we love all these like interstitial realities that come around through the meeting of mediums and things. It gets more complex. To be honest, it's almost to the point where it's like you could just exist with the fairies at some point. But it's fun, you know, to get lost in these particles and interconnections. And that's where we come back to the metaphor of like the garden, for example, which I think is a fun place to kind of go back to metaphorically, because it's full of all these meetings of things and dramas and relationships, and I guess we kind of spend a lot of our time, like Ollie used the word choreography, but we love this word. I mean, it's so useful, like choreography and acting and scenario and all the words associated with like theater originally are like, and tragedies, like personas, you know, etc., facts, fictions. This is like kind of the words we end up using, you know?
Sounds like you're in a constant quest to not be bored.
Yeah. But also to try and connect with you with the inner core of what it is to be human in the end, right?
So
like meaning core.
Yeah. So what would be boring then?
Bureaucracies and stuff, like wrong reasons. The wrong reasons to do things, wrongness. Boring is when you do not know why, and no one's interested to talk about it. Like, stop asking questions. You know, like this way the system is, you know.
thing is, there's you know, it's not like we don't also do. It's not like there isn't boring aspects to the work. You know, if you're working on a big visual identity, there is space for that element of the work, but there is also like you've got to deliver a visual identity guideline. There needs to be rules and grids and all of that stuff. It's like we
totally,
it is
ragging
boring in comparison, but there's a definite quality and a, you know, you've got to be diligent with these things. You know, it's not like we're handing over things which are only fun. You know, some of it is quite detailed and rigorous and
boring.
No, there is definitely
Boring might be good.
But there's also a joy to that. There is also a joy to that in a certain way. It's not like
Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus, his act of defiance against the gods that gave him this repetitive task was to enjoy it. So he's like, oh well, I'm going to enjoy this, and I think that's just amazing.
Totally, like this kind of ritualistic boredom in a way is quite important.
Yeah, but that wasn't. You really just kind of twisted my question completely. Yes, sure, there is boring things in processes of production of anything, and we're all producing things. You know, I'm going to edit this conversation, and it's not going to be fun, like editing it.
But that's just part of the work.
But that's just
right?
part of the work. That's not maybe what I meant. I guess what I meant is like what bores you in the visual world or in the world of ideas and.
I think all the things like the kind of manipulation of humans to make them do things that make no sense. You know, that's why we find it so boring. Like marketing, we find really, really boring. Like, you know, working strategically on manipulating people.
What about a boring film? You're trying to twist it again. What about
am I being twisted?
What about a boring film, or what about a boring exhibition? Or what about a boring book?
No, boring is good in that sense.
Sorry, what was the question?
Boring things are really important. I can't not twist this because there's potential in boredom.
What do you find boring? Like unexpansive questions. We sometimes get asked really boring.
All right.
Put it this way: occasionally we get asked a very, very boring question.
Like what?
Like, we need to refresh our visual identity. You know, currently our color palette only consists of gray.
My God.
You know, that kind of like that being like the first question is deathly boring.
Okay, and you would.
It doesn't happen very often, but that level of
engagement.
Non-vision is tricky.
There's a value in everything.
Okay, maybe there's. Okay, what about bad?
Well, bad is. Sorry, you really struggle to get us to ever be like completely doomsy because we like problems. Bad is like look. If you go back to a sort of like certain school of philosophy, which kind of talks about it's not certain school, it's majority, which is like beautiful, good, and true.
Yes, it's
everything that we should focus on, beautiful, good, and true. Then it would be like ugly, lying, evil. That doesn't sound so good. But I'm not sure we go there. But, you know, I guess sometimes badness, like wrong, is probably a better word. Let me just say this point, because wrong is a good word, right? Like I realized recently wrong is to like bend. It means to bend something. So sometimes we really like things that are a bit wrong in order to contrast something else.
Yeah, but there is a sweet spot, no?
There is, and you can get that like, you can misplace that idea. So in a sense, what we may fall victim to certain times is like sort of things like aspiration and like vanity and like, you know, like greed. You know, these things would be things to avoid. Greed would be trying to do it quick to make some, you know, like in a sense, like you just avoid those things. You try to.
I always used to think about one of the most important things about doing good work in a kind of, let's call it, just say efficient in terms of not wasting time, is basically to know to have an idea of what something is when you start it. right? So basically being able to identify the potential of something. It's not like it's a good project, it's a bad project. It's like, this project has this potential, therefore we do it like that, and then you can make it good, right? If the project has no potential, we wouldn't do it. So within the things we decide to do, it's not good or bad, it's like, what is the potential, and therefore how do you approach it?
We do get it wrong sometimes, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone seems like someone that is really interested, but they're actually just like really good at pretending to be, or sometimes we realize that the product or the thing that they were making, like the bag or the shoe or the whatever that they, seem to be very control of, maybe ends up being, not very good for the world, or not very beautiful, not very good, beautiful, or true, right? Which means you're then celebrating these things through your relationship with it. And that's really tough. That's a very tough aspect of doing what we do, because we don't do it in vacuums, right? Like, our work exists in constant interrelation of other things. So we need those things to also be right. And we've gone pretty far sometimes to try and also like help both sides, same way where you'd hope to be able to get that. Like, a very good collaborator would also make our work better, and with really interesting, stimulating sort of thoughts. The same way we might try and do the same back to the person that's making the other thing. Like that, certainly with things like books and content, but like also, like products and brands and commercial world, it's much more in a way important, because we've made a lot of fashion projects where we've really tried to hide the clothes, because we don't really want to sell fashion in the end. We want people to get their needs met, right? Like, it's not like we're not going to go around like sabotaging fashion. That would be an extreme thing to do. But it's more that we don't want to necessarily like push the selling, because it's
well, that's just not our expertise. We don't write. That's not one of our.
We don't do that.
Services. Obviously, we work with fashion in a way which adds a different type of value. It's not. We don't really market things. That's not.
But we're about to start working with a marijuana company in California. We're going out next week to go and meet with them and start working together. And we've started this project off where it's a product-based company, but we're talking about working with them to reset their kind of values back to what they really want to be doing and communicating, which is like farming and sustainable methods, and creating a certain limit on growth and a certain limit on capital-led culture, which is very limiting for the things they value, like farms being healthy, etc., with nature and other sorts of ecosystems. So, I guess it'll be interesting to go into another field and see, so it's a pun, but another area, and see if we can also bring some kind of positive values to it.
I mean, it's interesting because as you say, you're not an advertising agency.
No.
But then you do add value that can potentially have that, can have a commercial impact.
Yeah, I think
how interesting is that?
That's basically we're good at establishing connections with audiences away from like direct sales, right? That, and it is a kind of you can't really put a figure on it, but it's you've got to find the right people that are let's say the project is at the point where that is going to add real value.
I think what Ollie was saying, which is true, it's like we don't really know how to like tell, or let's say forecast, or and I've seen people that try, like we've been involved in. For instance, we work a lot with Jack Self, and Jack for a while was in a position of being sort of in a very prominent position at Pangaea to try and like restructure their business, and his methods were very much involved in the economics and the kind of in a sense forecasting of how a brand could like in a sense improve their economic
We're
systems.
not particularly fluent in this aspect, but I think it is at the end of the day. It's, if you're a marketing or advertising agency, you're dealing in these types of problems, right? You're claiming that you can add value there, but that's not. We don't. It's not.
Yes,
what
and
we
I
do.
guess what I'm curious about is that you've still had to create space for that, to be in that position where you can do this without that. I mean, okay, there might be a project with a bit of pressure.
Publishing is not a very smart business to get into, especially the art book market.
Or architecture.
You know, you have to. For us, it works because InOtherWords exists within the ecosystem of OKRM, and through that, we're able to kind of, bring projects into InOtherWords. You know, we offer something back to. There's a kind of mutual beneficial relationship between the two. If it was just the publishing imprint, we would probably struggle to kind of maintain our flow. Unless you're doing hugely, pop books, like cookbooks, or you're working, I don't know, something like the Virgil Abloh book, which Delmonica published, and you're selling 50,000 copies. Otherwise, it's really it's a break-even business, isn't it? It's not. But that's not. I don't know if that's even related to the original.
No, I think it is. It is. I mean, yeah. No, I'm just fascinated by the kind of the model of it, where you're able to sustain a business that has that level of ambiguity to it. Like I was just saying, how Lars Muller was saying how, like, obviously he publishes like 15 to 20 books a year, and then it's kind of hit and miss. He's like, this one sold so much, and then this one didn't sell at all, and he thought the opposite would be the case. And
it's hard to predict those things. We try to build like a kind of cultural resonance, I suppose, around what we do, which means even books which maybe aren't as like famous in their content or popular, let's call it, are still like resonant to our audience or attractive to our audience based on other things, like the way it's been designed or the kind of, the way it deals with its problematic content. In general, we work like that. It's not design. This isn't some kind of bohemian practice, right? Like in the end, we're also, i.e., dealing with an audience that doesn't exist or whatever. We're also like quite attuned to the contemporary, right? Like, and a lot of the work we're talking about, which maybe feels ambiguous in the way that it kind of comes to be in the world, is also like very advanced forms of communication tools in the end. Like, at the moment we're working on some crazy projects, and one of the most crazy is what we're doing is we've set up a kind of communication outpost which acts as a sort of research and sort of tool making center for an eventual new city in Africa. So it's like, it's crazy, it's like, it still makes us laugh whenever we bring it up because it's just so futuristic and so sort of rarefied, and in a way it's like a kind of movie, but actually it's pretty realistic because it's sort of like, it's essentially using design to design the structure of how research and like to develop like ideology, beliefs, ecosystems, community methods, cultural exercises, practical research of tools like rammed earth, or how you can use the earth, or how you can use, work with others like architects and so on, can happen, but in a non-bureaucratic format, right? Like in a more open, holistic, curious way. And I'm supposing, I don't know this, but I'm supposing that might relate more to how things were. If you're some, original peoples migrating over the Siberian ice caps into what is North America, however 1,000 years ago, and you hit new land, what do you do? You know, you start talking about what it means and where you should go and how you can use what you've got and how you can relate to the meaning of the stars at night. And this is just super ordinary in a way. Like it isn't that crazy. That's why I'm reading a book which is all about this at the moment, so I'm really enjoying not feeling like, oh my God, we're so crazy. We've gone so far away from, it's more like the other way. We're just going back to a more human method, I think. And we've got people to work with which have access to economies and so on, and bravery in a way to, you know, stimulate that. And
I have one last question.
yeah.
And that is to do with you as almost educators. So, you know, I think I just remembered maybe one of the questions that I asked last time was the question of people that come through your practice and that leave and go on and do other things and perhaps embody to a degree some of the ethos or culture that you develop and establish here at OKRM. So, how do you think about that? Are you able to see it?
I mean, we hope, right? I do know we do have like a small community of people that we can like check in with that like feel the sort of heritage of thinking that they may have like first been part of here and now continue with, and they enjoy like being in dialogue around it. We tried to create alliances, like our new alliance with Bas van der Pol and his studio Modem in the Netherlands with Open Studio is a good example. It's like, and he calls it, the Dutch call these things alliances. For us, it felt a bit Star Wars or something. But it was like, it's because they're used to it. Like the Dutch are really good at creating like Calvinistic sort of structures, you know, where everyone's sort of together in on it. And so I'm like kind of into that. I'm into the idea of being part of something with someone else. We need to build bridges. We know that full well. Like we can't, we have no interest in being an island, you know, as OKRM. And sometimes, especially if we spend a lot of time being very head down in what we're doing, we can start feeling a little bit like islanders.
I mean, maybe you don't teach, but I wonder if there's any component where you see yourself as teachers.
Yeah, we've been teachers.
We were for 3 or 4 years. We ran a course at Urbino in Italy.
Spatial design. Professors of spatial design. We are in a way teachers consistently in our work and with the people we work with.
You came to the AA and
yeah. It's important to us. It's not for us only, you know. Yeah. It's not. I mean,
because a teacher doesn't really produce an outcome. It's you're kind of facilitating a production of something, perhaps.
Yeah, it's like a culture. It's like a reminder of sorts. Yeah, I mean, we hope that the next chapter